Hi, I'm James Canigliaro, CEO of Dwellworks Living. Thanks for joining us today for the third in our webinar series, The Essentials of Corporate Housing. Today we'll be talking about maximizing value for business travel. We've got some great speakers, both from the corporate side, agency side, industry representatives, and a corporate housing operator as well. We'll hope you'll come and view the webinar, and you can visit dwellworksliving.com/webinars to see all of our webinars and learn more about Dwellworks Living. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, and good afternoon, good evening. And good morning, I guess, to all of you who have joined us here today for this third session in our Essentials of Corporate Housing webinar. As Magda's indicated, today we're going to be focusing specifically on maximizing value for business travel. I am Maura Carey. I'm the Vice President of Content and Research here at Dwellworks and Dwellworks Living. Shortly, we'll be introducing our very distinguished panel. Just wanted to acknowledge that we appreciate very much having you all here join us today. The intent of these webinars has always been to be able to provide a good overview of very core topics related to the accommodation space in the travel and relocation industry, and to create a learning opportunity, hopefully with some useful takeaways for all of you who've taken the time to join us. Excuse me. And in this webinar today, specifically on maximizing value for business travel, we're going to explain why, in fact, furnished apartments are an ideal accommodations option for business travel. And your business travelers could include executives, new hires, interns, folks on extended projects, folks moving for a relocation business, group assignments, and essentially the whole body of work that makes up your travel population. Our panelists are going to share some real-life use cases and that illustrate the advantages of incorporating an alternative accommodations strategy into your business travel plans. We're going to go ahead and have a conversation that will last for about 40 minutes, followed by Q&A. Please go right ahead and make your questions into the chat feature throughout the entire duration of our conversation. We'll look forward to calling those when we get to the end of our conversation here today and answering as many as we can in the time available to us, and of course addressing those that we can't in the follow-up comments. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce my panel. Thank you so much, Megan. Starting first with Carol Fergus, who is the Director of Global Travel at Fidelity International. Carol is based in the UK, where she manages a global team as well as multiple projects and initiative streams and within her remit. Carol was recently appointed to the GBTA Global Board of Directors. She is a diversity and inclusion champion and has earned many accolades for her work in our industry, including Global Travel Manager of the Year. Welcome, Carol. Any further comments for our audience?
I'm really looking forward to the debate today, and thank you, and I'm really pleased to be here.
Great honor to have you. Nick Estrada is the CEO of the Corporate Housing Providers Association, CHPA, headquartered here in the US. Nick was appointed CEO earlier this year after over 6 years in executive roles there at CHPA. He works, of course, to achieve their strategic goals and innovation and member advocacy, as well as support for our industry. And he shapes the strategic vision of the Corporate Housing Association in general. Nick is also responsible for some key initiatives in sustainability, which we hope to touch on in our conversation today. Welcome, Nick. Any other comments?
No, thank you, Maura. I'm excited to be here.
Great, delighted to have you. And my colleague, Stuart Jam, who is joining us from Singapore. So thank you, Stuart, for making that effort to be with us here today. Stuart is our Client Services Director based in APAC, specifically in Singapore, excuse me. He has expertise in hospitality, in relocation, and in travel. Excuse me. And he identifies new clients for our business, as well as building thriving relationships with the customers we already have, with a focus on providing tailored accommodation solution, both for corporate clients as well as for relocation management companies. Stuart, thanks so much for joining us. Any additional comments?
Oh, thank you so much. Greetings from Singapore. And of course, thank you everyone for joining this webinar. Looking forward today as well.
Great. Thank you. We're looking forward to hear what each of you have to say. Thanks so much. So as Megan and I have already indicated, our talking time is going to be about 40 minutes. We have organized today's conversation, because it's a very broad topic, obviously, into a couple of key subjects. Of course, look forward to your questions. And if there's anything further we can expand on, happy to do it. But in order to sort of keep our conversation on track and manageable, we've isolated a couple of key areas of interest for our panel to sort of dive into. So with that, I think it's okay then to move right to the next slide. The first topic we want to talk about is understanding, of course, the environment we're all operating in. What is the global travel market right now? What goes on in the role of the global travel buyer? And frankly, what goes on in the mind of the customers we're all here to serve? So with that, we're going to table set with a couple of key pieces of information recently circulated by GBTA, the Global Business Travelers Association. They published this information just a month ago in August. The first piece of information is this comparison between the years 2019 and years 2024. I know we're all being encouraged to stop looking back and to only look forward. It's hard to constantly go back and sort of manage ourselves relative to the pandemic era, but this is a really telling statistic. This is the year when the spend in global travel has come back to those pre-pandemic levels. You can see basically at just under $1.5 billion, where in 2019 it was at about $1.45 billion. So it's a very, very good indicator. What's important to note, though, is that these spend numbers do not necessarily equate to volume. Yes, travel is back, not exactly at the same level that it was before. And what makes the difference that enables that spend level to be the same is inflation. So obviously part of the conversation today is even as travel has come back, even as new solutions have come on market and on stream, obviously buyers and travelers need to be very cognizant of what the cost factors are in their space. And we want to make sure that we address that today. The next slide, thanks, Megan, is about what is going on in the mind of the corporate traveler themselves. Again, much has changed since 2019. As you can see, maximizing comfort is the key expectation that travelers have while on the road. And it's important to note this isn't just about, fluffier pillows and a more luxurious space. Maximizing comfort for travelers these days means paying attention to who they are. Traveler needs have obviously adapted and adopted over the ensuing period of the last 5 years. And I think it's become, a very important trend in our industry to be very mindful of who travelers are, why they're sent out on the road, what their expectations are to leave home and go out on behalf of their business. So that too is going to be a key part of our conversation. And so with that, we're going to jump right into the conversation, starting with Carol. And when you see these visuals, both about the return to travel and about the expectation of the business traveler, good news, obviously activity is up. It's broadly geographically dispersed. Does this sound about right for your business? And specifically, what's going on in the mind of your travelers and how, in fact, has it impacted your job as the director of global travel?
Yeah, absolutely. These figures resonate with me. We are seeing that our spend has gone up, but we haven't seen that our volumes have gone up in the same way if we look back. I know we should be looking back, but looking forward. But if we look back to 2019, we're nowhere near the volumes that we were at that time. And I think the price is definitely inflation. And as a buyer, I have to think about how I manage that, both with managing my demand and how I negotiate with my suppliers and the landscape that I build. And secondly, in terms of the volumes going down, we've made lots of changes. I think like with lots of other companies, there's a lot going on around cost savings and monitoring your costs and monitoring that demand. And as a result of that, we've put some robust approval process in place, especially for what we call internal travel. So anything that's not client facing, we need that to be approved at quite a high level. People are a lot more mindful about what they're doing as well within their business areas. There's been a number of restructuring within the organization, looking at value, efficiency, effect. And again, that's playing on people's minds in terms of, well, what does that mean for me? So if I travel, do I really need to travel? Is it, what's the return on investment? Do I need to spend time with my team? But if I do, travel less, stay longer. So with the shift in our policies, our processes, and shift in minds as well, we're seeing that's had an impact on the way that people travel. I think for me as a buyer, I also have to be very mindful of what's happened since the pandemic. And with dynamic working, expectations have changed. People want more of a home from home feel. They also think twice about traveling. And, if I'm going to travel, what's the value for me, not just the company? And, is it worth my while, or can I just do it work with my clients and my colleagues from the office? And when they do travel, they want to feel that they've got that comfort and they have the option to have that work from home experience and not have to be in a stuffy suit or in a hotel all the time. So there is a balance. There are audiences that want to stay in a hotel, but there are more audiences that now want to have that service department, home from home comfort that we weren't seeing before. We still have to drive it, and we still need to let people experience it for them to want to do it more. But definitely we're seeing a shift in behavior and wanting that more home from home feel. So I have to be a lot more mindful as a buyer in taking on the changes and the nuances in each of the regions and making sure that we're meeting those needs.
Great. Thank you, Carol. What a great introduction. Certainly helps us understand the complex environment you're operating in and the expectations, obviously, that both your business and your travelers have. Stuart, widening that lens to the people that you speak both in region and to sort of a broader list of customers, what are some of the key instances and expectations you're hearing in the marketplace about the new global travel environment?
Absolutely, Maura. I think as Carol mentioned, as herself as a global director for travel, I think those expectations also align with those of our clients in Asia Pacific region. Now, some key examples such as like proximity and accessibility, these must be conveniently located near business districts, public transport links, or even local attractions. Now, I think one of the key factors as well is language support as well. I think with language barriers prevalent in Asia Pacific, clients expect accommodations to offer must have multilingual staff and support on that. And of course, most important of all would be the health, safety, and security checks as well. I think this is definitely paramount. I think clients expect robust protocols and procedures to make sure we mitigate risk. So I think these would definitely better serve our clients in APAC and definitely will meet their unique needs. So over to you, Maura.
Great. Thank you very much for giving us that background description. And then Nick, obviously, as head of a major business travel association yourself, when you hear about the size and scope and sort of coming volume, even if it's not all back yet, of the business traveler, what's your response in terms of the readiness of this particular accommodation sector to meet the onslaught of demand?
Yeah, obviously, in terms of the service delivery, I think we're well equipped to be able to provide those accommodations, right? Even looking at the kind of what the priority is for traveling, right? Both to the traveler, right, in terms of maximizing that comfort and that home from home, as Carol was mentioning, as well as to the business unit itself in minimizing the costs. As you mentioned, Maura, we're all seeing increases, right? Hotels are not getting any cheaper. I'm not going to sit here and say that we're getting any cheaper either, but we are seeing a slower increase in our year-over-year daily rates, right? So I think that that's an important component. And back to Carol, when you can string together maybe some individual stays or lengthen one person's stay, right? We can help to minimize that cost even more. So I think that from a readiness side, I think that's really helpful. Stuart just mentioned the duty of care. I think we and our members fully believe that we are a part of your duty of care process. And so we are huge supporters of that security and safety side. So I think that is obviously a huge piece. In terms of the supply, I'll be transparent. I think supply can be a little difficult sometimes, right? I think we're seeing developers are starting to finally get back to being willing to build, I think, some multifamily units, again, which is great. We need that stock. Again, many of our members around the world utilize that. And so as the development has started to pick back up, we're able to get some more of that stock. With that being said, I think from the traveler side, communicate your needs earlier, right? Before you think you might need them, because that allows members and our providers to be able to go out and source that inventory. Again, while it is difficult or a little bit more challenging, it's not impossible to get, right? And so there are times when, as long as we've got the necessary lead, I think our members are more than willing and able to support the supply that you will need for your travelers.
Great. Thank you very much. Wow, that was a great sort of introduction to the environment we're all operating in. To Nick's point, we're going to talk a little bit later about the sort of growth and surge we think we see coming in accommodations so that we continue to have more options available to our customers in more places. Talk about that in a second. And having set that table for what the expectations are, we're now going to talk a little bit about the factors that are in favor of using alternative accommodations as a solution for the situations that you all have just described here. There are, in fact, several factors that influence the choice of any type of hospitality selection, alternative accommodations or otherwise. Obviously, there's employee preferences, There is cost, as we've just outlined. There's the reason. Why is this person traveling? For how long? How many of them are traveling? Are they traveling in a group? And of course, the length of stay. In our limited time available today, we won't be able to get into every one of those factors, but we're going to talk about a few of them. And we're going to table set that with this quote from Skift, the New York-based research entity that focuses on business travel. It says about 60% of business travelers surveyed by Skift Research earlier this year in 2024, first quarter, said they had extended their trips for leisure purposes while they were on the previous 3 months. Some properties actually miss these opportunities because they lack appropriate amenities. Leisure-focused hotels could boost bookings by outfitting select rooms with ergonomic workspaces. We're using that as a jumping off space because, of course, as we've already discussed, alternative accommodations sort of start from that position. They already have the ergonomic workspaces. They don't need to retrofit. The whole point of being in this alternative solution is not sort of adapting a hotel to business travel and extended business travel, but rather being sort of in place with those solutions to begin with. So we're going to go right ahead and then jump into that conversation with Carol. When you see these statements, can you give us an idea about, is in fact business travel being extended by the folks that you put on the road? And are you finding that business travelers are in fact asking for a different type of accommodations when they're on the move for you?
Most definitely. I mean, it plays to our policy, travel less, stay longer. And if you're going to on these long international trips, it makes sense for a lot of people to add on the leisure piece to that trip. And not only are they acclimatizing to where they are, it's giving them that whole work-life balance, which is what people are asking about. When we, there's a lot of talk about, traveler well-being, and this is an opportunity to do that. It's right that a lot of the properties are missing a trick when they with their offerings, especially with our policy. When we say longer, if you look at even things like the amenities, laundry, you're not going to be able to, it's going to cost a lot of money to pay for your laundry to be done on a 2-3 week trip. And if you're averaging, 12 to 14 days at some stage, unless you take a lot of luggage, you're going to have to do the laundry. So it's just stuff like that where I think properties need to start thinking outside of the box, and it's not just a bed. It's a lot more than just a bed. And as I said at the beginning, it's having that balance between the option of being in the office and being in your apartment or your accommodation in the same way that you would do if you were at home. A lot of the people that you're going to see, they're not, especially if you're going to your own office, they're not going to be there every day because they work the same way as we do. They have a hybrid option, and that hybrid option allows them to work from home. And there was an occasion where I was traveling and I was sitting by the window, beautiful desk, and I didn't know anybody because all the people that I knew were working from home that I didn't need to see. So if I'd had that option, I probably would have stayed in an apartment. So I think it's really important to think that mindsets have changed. We are seeing a lot of that stay longer. People want to bring their families. Organizations need to be prepared for that and be able to give those offerings. And if you're traveling on your own, you want the option to have choice. And that choice for me is comfort, seamless, safe, secure, lovely environment. So absolutely, I agree with that. And that's what's happening in my world.
Great. Thank you so much again. Excuse me for explaining to us what's happening in your environment and how you're managing through that. I think in putting together this webinar, we discussed with Stuart the fact that in addition to sort of travelers who are extending their stay for leisure, there's all kinds of populations on the road right now. And the need for alternative accommodations is often expressed in other types of business needs, specifically around groups, around training, around education. And I think we wanted to share a use case for our listeners around how we developed that solution for a certain specific type of need that was really only ideally met through alternative accommodations. So, Stuart, do you want to go ahead and share that use case with us?
Sure. Thank you for the question again, Maura. First and foremost, I think we had the great opportunity to manage group moves into Asia Pacific for our clients. But just want to share with you, not all groups have the same needs, and definitely they come in various forms and sizes. So here in Dwellworks, we leverage our expertise in both destination services as well as corporate housing to design customizing housing needs that integrate from various types of accommodations. So back in 2023 and this year, we supported one of our banking clients to manage a group move that expanded into multiple Asia-Pacific locations. Now, their program included a 5-day orientation program, continued with a 6-week on-the-job training internship. Now, this group move involved all 115 interns across Hong Kong, Shanghai, Singapore, as well as Japan. Now, we've collaborated with the client to pre-select their approved hotels from their transient program, and thereafter, our curated selections of service apartments as options. Now, through this process, we provided consulting services such as how much can you save, and explain the proximity distance between the training sites and discuss on the contractual terms as well. We also took time to arrange viewings so that they can get their bearings across where the training location is. So with this diverse and expansion of this group, we somehow ensured a very seamless process from the group that interchanged from a hotel to a service apartment. And we realized many of these interns are pleasantly surprised with service apartments amenities. So playing this pivotal role, our guest services team also provided each guest with their essential arrival information, offered a kind of what to expect scenarios for the guests upon arrival to a service apartment, and therefore we enhanced their comfort, making this transition more smooth. So Mauro, I hope these shed more in-depth details and insights to our attendees today as well.
Great. Thanks very much, Stuart. Yeah, and I think that's an important, again, feature about being, excuse me, in these alternative accommodations is this idea not only of comfort, but some of the wraparound services and sort of getting folks comfortable in the destination, as you've just outlined. Nick, and when you hear that, again, I know that the industry, the corporate housing professionals industry, has itself, expanded over time. So as you hear that, and I've jotted down some of the terms that we've been talking about, customization, your own comment about expanding the time and notice required, a consultative approach. Can you just give us an idea of how sort of the very functional sort of corporate housing in days of yours has moderated? What should people expect when they check in these days into a alternative accommodation solution?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate going after Carol and Stuart because I continue to just feel like, yes, teed me up for great responses here. I think the key thing, right, is I've read a lot of articles, I've seen a lot of research out there, right? The key terms that continue to come up, and I think Carol and Stuart hit on some of these, are just that continued personalization and the flexibility, right? And I think that when you talk about those two terms, what better things than to describe the serviced accommodation or corporate housing industry and what we can provide to travelers, because truly, I think we are the perfect solution for personalization, right? We can talk with you about what you need. Even to Stuart's point, it's not even just project travel. It could be individual travel within your own business unit, right? Again, what your top executive needs is different than what your interns need, right? In terms of travel accommodations, location within the city, or the destination that you're going to. And truly, I think our providers are able to provide service at all levels there, right? We can have a conversation about what kinds of things need to go in the unit. And truly, our providers are. We've got a group that's called the Professional Practices Task Force, and I know they talk about this all the time, right? Like, what's our minimum checklist that has to go into a unit? And that really does change over time. If you look at what it used to be, right? We talked about alarm clock radios had to be in every unit, and I don't think we have that conversation anymore, right? And I know that's a small example, but we really do talk about, right? Like, do we need cable anymore? As we know that our travelers are typically moving with streaming services, and they would prefer to use their own streaming services. So how do we provide the technology that supports them? Knowing, to Carol's point, right? Even travelers are likely going to work from home a couple of days. How do we ensure that they have strong wireless access points, right? The focus of what the traveler needs has changed, and I think our providers are ready to have that conversation, even to the level of, we know that especially on relocations, I think a conference I was just at, they quoted, I think it was 90% of relocation requests are now coming through with pet requests and their families, as we would know, right? So now, instead of having maybe what would have been able to be serviced with a studio or a 1-bedroom, now we need a 2 or even a 3-bedroom with pet, right, as well. And again, our members are able to source that really easily for everyone, again, with the lead time, but again, finding that unique thing that fits for that specific traveler, and again, for the business need.
Great, thank you. And thanks for giving us the topic of our next webinar, which no doubt will be pets and travel, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. But that's really helpful. Thank you so much. And so having sort of table set on, okay, we get it. This is what the expectations are. And indeed, are the accommodations up to those expectations? We're now going to shift the conversation a little bit to cost, which is obviously another critical factor. Please go ahead, excuse me, and put your questions in the chat. I'm sure that you might come up with a few regarding especially sort of cost management. We're happy to answer those in today's conversation. As Megan has indicated, this content, as well as all the content that we're sharing here today, will be included in what we forward on to you after the conversation. So we're not going to go through this line item by line item, but of course are here to have that conversation with you. The point about costs is essentially to sort of give us a sort of a benchmark against different types of experiences and what those expectations are. A business hotel, excuse me, and a hotel in general has a different operating model than a corporate housing provider might provide. Specifically, that they are looking to maximize the value that the hotel realize through the stay. And understandable, that's what the business model is. It's more expensive to operate a hotel. And so not surprisingly, the cost of a stay in a corporate hotel, especially over time, this is for, sort of extended stays, is going to be more expensive than a stay in corporate housing, which, as I just indicated, and as Nick has sort of very ably demonstrated, is all around sort of creating a business-to-business service. And for the purpose of our today's conversation, a short-term rental are those rentals that your employees may be browsing for online. They're not necessarily short-term rentals inside a corporate travel program, but we all know, obviously, that employees have access to sort of browsability. The factor there is not so much the compliance, although that's a very significant factor. It's the fact that they're completely unpredictable. And so while there may be some savings there, everything else inside that experience is highly variable and not necessarily something that a corporate travel planner is looking for. So keeping sort of these factors in mind, let's go ahead and ask a couple of questions. With you, Stuart, and your expertise specifically, having been in the travel sector, having been in the hospitality sector, can you make the savings argument specifically around serviced accommodations? At one point, does the convenience and sort of brand recognition of a hotel solution sort of get offset by the value that you get by being in corporate accommodations?
Thank you, Maura. Of course, I'm excited to dive into this topic and how can we explore on offering significant cost savings compared to hotels. But before we begin, I wanted to clarify that these savings aren't universally applicable and that the potential savings depending on various factors like, again, what Nick and Carol mentioned also, the kind of duration of stay. Are you traveling alone? Are you traveling as a group? And purpose of the business travel, training, is it for in-person client presentation or client contract signing? So at what point it will end up costing more? Like, for example, in APAC cities, there are local government regulatories that impose different utility tariffs on service apartments versus hotels. So this is because of licensing differences as well. A hotel will require a much more intensive licensing process. Now, also, hotels are also in downtown CBD areas that usually will have more utility or operational costs, which often will pass down to the guests. And as everyone was saying, home away from home, a second home wherever you go, even for a few nights stay, particularly for a week more, you get significantly more expensive, accumulating daily services like in-room dining and laundry, dry cleaning services. Often these are based on smaller hotel room sizes. Now, service apartment, on the other hand, provides more cost-effective with the added value of space, kitchenette, washer dryer in the apartment. These can cut down ancillary costs. And you can cut down like dining out, express cleaning. And then not only that, this gives you a home-like environment. It gives you more independent living and typically gives you a lower nightly rate for extended stays without sacrificing comfort. Now, my last point would be that service apartments typically face fewer taxes. Now, hotels are always subject to service taxes, tourism taxes, non-local levy on top of the standard VAT. Now, even for service apartment, even stays at less than 30 nights often charge a simplified rate, a single line for an entire stay, which gives you further savings. So while hotels are great for short-term, high-touch stays, the convenience they offer can quickly lead up to higher costs for extended stays. So I do hope these generate some insights for audience, Maura.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah. As always with any business conversation, it's always about the iceberg, right? Like, what does it look like on top of the water? And then once you go underneath, lots to look into, including as you just indicated, some not so much hidden costs, but baked in costs. There's no getting around paying taxes, for example, and the taxes that you pay for hospitality may be different than the business taxes associated with a corporate housing operation. Carol, as Stuart has sort of table set the environment and what it is to have an alternative accommodations and what their the sort of cost favorability is. You manage this in real time, right? You've got real travelers moving to real places all the time. Could you help us understand how you describe this sort of choice to your customers, and whether that's based on a length of stay, 5+, 7+, 30+, or how in fact you present alternative accommodations to your travel audience?
Well, first of all, we don't differentiate, to be fair, because again, it's about choice. So we call our program an accommodations program, and we do that specifically for people to see what the opportunities are and ensure that they're making the choices that meet their requirements at the time. But having said that, our policy says that anything that's 5 days plus, you should look for a service department in the first instance. And the reason for that is, as we've all said a few times, prices have gone up significantly. So you want to keep those room nights or those night stays as competitive as you possibly can. And what we've found is that corporate housing or service departments meet that requirement for us. So that's how we manage it. 5 days plus, ensuring that we have negotiated competitive prices, and the way we benchmark is a 1-bed apartment versus a standard room. And the price of our 1-bed apartment should be cheaper than our cheapest standard room in our program. So, and we've found that we've been able to do that, and it works very, very well. I think the important thing for us is to ensure that we have a program with teeth, is to be working with partners that have the inventory, so that globally we have that global offering. But I think 5 days plus, call it an accommodations program that's aligned so that there's choice, and ensuring that we're negotiating competitive prices that we're able to benchmark and measure against a standard hotel is the way that we operate. It's very clear, straightforward, and people know how it works and what their choices are.
Great. Thank you very much. I love that. That's sort of what I guess I would call positive tensions between choice and control. So you have full visibility, sort of benchmarking in real time. So thank you so much for that. And also when you just sort of table set the idea that people sort of know what their options are. Among those options, Nick, let's just talk for a second about the fact that employees do sometimes want to make the case to their employers that I found something cheaper and better on the internet. No surprise, can't keep people from going online. But at the same time, what are the business arguments to be made for? You may have found something that met a couple of criteria, but again, referring to the conversation we had before, not necessarily all of them. So what is the argument to be made for using a service apartment solution as opposed to a short-term rental accommodations that you may have found on the web?
Yeah, I think from the business perspective, right, I think the key component of this is that the corporate housing and the service accommodation industry, we're not a commodity, right? So we're not this, just go out and pick whatever you want and grab anything, and as long as it's cheaper, we're good with it, right? Back to, there's a balance between what the business unit is looking for and what the traveler needs. And I think that in this case, the balance on the business unit side typically will win, right? The first of those is that, again, that duty of care protection piece is just so important, again, that we're putting you in vetted and safe units that have strong security in a variety of in ways, right? We want to make sure that that is protected. And again, as we begin this true partnership, really, right, with your business, right, I think that's a key component. Again, that strategic cost protection for your organization, again, Carol mentioned, right, it typically is cheaper. I think we would agree with that. I think on our side as well, it's in a discussion about how can we help view your overall travel program as well, right? Because maybe you're like, oh, I do have 10 travelers this year that need to go, but they're all going at different times. And we say, what if we just got you one apartment for the whole year, right? And now your traveler gets to go into that every single time, and it's just automatically yours for the year. And we've been able to reduce the cost there as well, in terms of even just setup and tear down of furniture and things like that, if that's something that we need to be putting in there for you. Additionally, I think we come with local knowledge So what's in the area? I heard Carol mention one of the important things is kind of a unique location, a kind of a fun place potentially, right, for your travelers. And so again, your traveler may have heard potentially about an area of a city that is like the go-to destination. But as we listen to your needs, again, where is your office? Where do you need to be going? How close do you need to be to transit, right? We have that local knowledge. So you may have found something that meets the price point, but is very far away and doesn't meet any of the other pieces. And the last one I would say is truly just the regulatory knowledge that providers are able to provide your business. Again, as we all know, short-term rentals are being regulated across the globe, for better or for worse in some places, right? In terms of what the aim is to be done. And I think my worry always for a traveler is potentially picking one of those short-term rentals that then sounded great, sounded amazing. You show up and it's not ready, it's not there, it can't, or it legally can't even be provided. Right? Our members can help to provide legal and safe spaces for your travelers to be able to be in.
Great. Thanks, Nick. So yeah, alternative, but not necessarily off the grid. That's really sort of the
Right.
story that we're going with here. And I think that brings us then into sort of our final discussion segment. Again, encouraging you to go ahead and put your questions in. This is where we're heading right towards them in just a second here. Thanks for the announcement, team. And so we're going to now go ahead and talk about like, okay, there's all these alternative accommodations out there. How do you in fact bake them into your travel management strategies? So we're going to use a couple of key data points, some of which we've already touched on before, to sort of summarize this conversation. Excuse me. The first data point is that business travelers are, in fact, staying longer for each stay. The second data point is that the average daily rate for hotels has gone up by 4.3% in the past 12 months, as Nick and others have made the case. It's also true that there is an increase in cost in dealing with the corporate housing sector, but at a lower rate, about 50% lower. So about a 2% increase in costs. And then you can see those sort of costs separating over time as the investment requires in the one sector are different than the investment requires in the other. And then third, we alluded earlier to the fact that as the business travel need comes back, terrific. Obviously, you need to have supply to meet that demand. And specifically inside the accommodations, the alternative accommodations area, it's a very attractive space. More and more options are becoming available in more and more locations. We're looking at a potential 300% growth in just the asset base. So good news, if you've got a traveler and you as a corporate are looking to be able to have options to put in front of your customers, more and more of those are going to be coming online in the near term. So, Carol, when we look at this data, it tells us that alternative accommodations are, in fact, increasingly part of the global travel ecosystem. For you, as again, a global travel buyer, you obviously do have these options. I mean, I'm sure you have, sort of global hotel partnerships and arrangements. Can you give us an explanation about what your expectations are for these types of accommodations and what you, as a manager of the business, expect your alternative accommodations provider to deliver to you?
Well, I think one of the key things for me, as I said before, we are doing the travel less, stay longer, a 5-day plus policy is the requirement. We have seen a shift towards service departments over hotels. There is work to be done, as I said at the beginning, that we need to engage more with our travelers. But once they use the apartments and they see the benefits, a lot of them never look back. I think more so in some regions than others. So for example, in India and Asia, coming into London, we see a lot of use of our service department, and we're seeing India grow in particular. We would definitely you talked about the I've lost my train of thought because you're taking the pictures away. Yeah, we've seen the increase. For me, the most important thing is the data. In order for me to survive and be able to really have a policy that has bite, I need that data from my partners in terms of what are we doing? What are the trends? Where are we staying? Where the growth is? How can I benchmark against my hotels versus my service departments when it comes to cost, and really drive the program. So the data for me is the most important thing. And I think that's probably been one of the downsides on both sides, both on the service department and the hotel world, that they're not really able to give you that really good data that you can use to make sound decisions and have a rich program. So I think that's really, really important that we have that data. We're able to monitor the trends. We're able to see activity, what our travelers are telling us, how we should be supporting them, etc. I think it's fantastic that the industry is looking to grow the market in terms of accommodation and assets, because without that inventory, my policy makes no sense. So globally, I run a global program, and I don't want to feel that there are only certain locations where there's lots of growth and lots of activity, and in other places nothing's happening. I think if companies talk global, then they should mean global, and they should not just be waiting for maybe something might happen. If they want to drive the service department world, then they need to give us the accommodation and the facilities to make that happen. And I think for the hotels in particular, they need to change and think about the way the world looks today and not how it used to look in the future, and look at their offerings, especially their amenities, and not just look at it as an average 1 and 2 night stay, but look at it as a future long-term stay and what's happening in the market. But for the service departments, I think that they're really there already. They have those amenities. These properties are absolutely amazing, some of them, to stay in. Some of them are better than our own homes, but we need that data and support in order to drive behavior and change mindset.
Terrific. Thank you, Carol. You can't get more explicit voice of the customer feedback than that. So thank you very much. Appreciate sort of table setting what those expectations are. Stuart, again, you obviously speak, excuse me, to a couple of different portfolio clients. When you hear that, and basically the challenge from Carol, which is, is the industry ready to sort of meet the business expectations? Can you give us some additional feedback around what those expectations are and what the responses generated are?
Yes, definitely, Maura. I think with the growing demand for diverse options, we are seeing service apartments offering a wide range of accommodation types, from standard units to luxury tier, and now we are even seeing co-living products. And this flexibility kind of caters to very different budgets, very different preferences, but aligning with business travel and offering more personalized choices for corporate travelers. So one of them is like accessibility. It is becoming a very key focus, not just in terms of physical spaces. Now, as we enter into the era of digital realm, hotels and service apartments are integrating their apartments into smart home technology, or offering technology service like self-service check-ins, digital concierge services, or even using your mobile phone as door keys, so on and so forth. Now, this provides a more user-friendly experience while enhancing the property's operational efficiency. Another point will be sustainability. This is no longer a buzzword anymore. I think it's an expectation. Service apartments are also now implementing eco-friendly practices like using energy-efficient appliances, undergoing reuse programs, waste reduction programs, and even using larger pump dispensing bottle for beverage amenities. How can you reuse your towel, less flow on the tap, for example. Now, these are very popular RFP submissions for travel managers review. And on the last point itself, as what Carol said, the value proposition standpoint, I think service apartments are trying to come up with more cost-effective solutions and offering more competitive pricing. Not only that, they are also expanding and try to emulate as hotels, having like a swimming pool as an added facility, not just kitchenette, not just a washer dryer in the apartment, that gives you a much larger value proposition as well. So all these trends are making service apartments a key player in corporate travel programs, aligning with the strategic directions of global travel managers who are always looking to meet evolving travel expectations while optimizing costs and sustainability efforts as well. Maura,
great.
over to you.
Thank you, Stuart. Excellent and comprehensive answer. And Nick, we're going to give the sort of final comments in our conversation to you, excuse me, which is you have done an excellent job of sort of explaining the readiness of the corporate travel provider in terms of their hospitality inclinations and sort of the upgrades and sort of responsiveness to the customer. How about on the business side? Obviously, demands, as Carol has just correctly outlined, for more information, better organized, more details. Just talk to us a little bit about the industry from that perspective and its sort of commercial readiness to be a supplier to corporate travel buyers.
Yeah, thanks, Maura. So again, first and foremost, I think our members would often view themselves as hospitality companies, right? They're there to provide that professional service. Beyond that, I do think that many of them as well view themselves again as that true consultative partner, right, in your travel needs. I'd be remiss if I didn't say, as you're vetting true partners, I think one of the key things you should be looking for, again, is looking for those providers who are members of CHPA, much like many of you are part of your professional organizations. So are ours, right? That's what they're here for. They're here to gain knowledge, to professionalize their business even more, to truly better serve you, right? So utilizing us as a resource for that, and as well at some level to maximize their network. I think that's something that is just really helpful for them as they look to service more globally. I think a key one as well, Carol mentioned data. I think our members are poised to provide that data when asked, right? I think maybe it's not always necessarily in their system to immediately produce a report that meets your business needs, but as you are able to ask for that information, they can provide that, right? They've got good data systems that allow them to pull, what was your spend over a certain amount of time? How many travelers have you had with them? And even around something, as Stuart just mentioned, sustainability, while it's been a little difficult, I do think that there's an opportunity coming on the horizon. CHPA is helping to kind of lead a conversation around a sustainability tool. If you're familiar with the Hotel Carbon Measurement Index in the hotel space, we're working to build something similar. We recognize, again, to Carol's point, that is a data point that has to be reported on. At some level, it's no longer a if we can give it to you, right? Like we recognize that becomes a part of your upstream reporting or downstream reporting. And so that's a thing that I think as we listen to the needs of the client, right, we're poised as an industry as well as individual companies within the industry to be able to answer those kinds of questions.
Great. Thank you so much. And indeed, thank you. As Stuart has outlined, sort of in the role of that sort of agent solutions provider on a global scale, to be able to cull all that information across a very wide and diverse supply chain base and put those sort of solutions in front of customers is exactly what we're all here to do. So thank you, Nick, for hitting on a couple of those key topics. We've reached the point where we're ready to take a look at some of the questions that our audience has put forward with us. We do have a couple of additional questions that we were given in advance. But Megan, do you have anything to share from the Q&A provided from our listener base?
Yeah, definitely. We would encourage people to add some more questions, specifically into the Q&A section here. Not so much the webinar chat. You'll see a section that says Q&A. Definitely more knowledge wanted about this social responsibility, sustainability sector of our industry. So looking to share the social responsibility expectations of a company and why they're important in business travel. I think that one might be good for Carol, Maura.
Yeah. Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, if you don't mind, Carol, leading off with that, we know you've been the sponsor and champion of multiple initiatives inside the industry, maybe giving us a framework around social responsibility expectations.
I think in all organizations, we've all got a responsibility when it comes to sustainability. And if you're participating and mindful of the requirements and try to align it with your suppliers, then it's important for me as a buyer to ensure that my travelers are recognizing that the things that we're talking about within the company, we're actually having those same discussions with our suppliers. So demonstrating to me as a buyer that you do have a carbon footprint and that you are demonstrating that in your properties from the moment we make that booking right the way through to arriving at the property and what you're offering. And although and it's not just a organization thing, it's an individual as your own thinking and as a traveler. So what are you telling me and what are you delivering and what are you showing me as an individual, as a traveler, and how are you working with my organization? And I think that every supplier should be saying, it's not something that we should read your mind. It's something that you should say, and it's also not a tick box. You should be telling us, this is the changes we're making, this is what it means to the traveller, and this is how we're demonstrating that we're doing those things. So Stuart mentioned about, not changing your towels, having recyclable bottles for water, and et cetera, et cetera. And we're seeing a lot of that, and we're seeing a lot of changes in the amenities, but there's also the community. How are you working with your communities? What are you bringing to the table? etc. What are the bigger changes that you're making? What bigger changes are you making within your environment in terms of energy? If you look at the airline, they're giving us stuff that we can, although it's still working, these are the measures, we can measure it. In the hotel, they say these are the things we're doing, but there's no sort of KPIs behind that. We're not sharing the measurements. So it's really important that we are shining a light on sustainability, and it's very visible, and it's meeting the requirements and needs of our travelers, me as an individual, and our organization. So it's aligning with our own sustainability requirements and targets and making it your business to find out what that is, clearly demonstrating what you're doing in your organization and giving us something that's tangible and measurable that we can take back to our sustainability leaders. So that's why it's important to me.
Great. Thank you very much. And I, again, really appreciate the conversation. You can't be passive in this process, right? If you're interested, you're interested. You want to lean in. You want to learn more. You obviously want to find out both what the customer and industry standards are, and then obviously come up with an appropriate response. Nick alluded to that a little bit inside of what's going on inside CHPA, inside the Corporate Housing Providers Association, as well as within their sustainability initiatives. Nick, I don't know if you have one more comment to make on that before we move on to the next question.
Yeah, I think just quickly, right? So Carol mentioned kind of the work that needs to be done there. I think it's two sides, right? One is the strategy, right? What is your business strategy around sustainability? And then the one on the other hand is resources and tools to help support that strategy. And I think that's where CHPA views kind of our role. Our role is to help provide a resource and a tool that in your company strategy you can utilize. Our solution, hopefully, right, is to help provide that data both for your own company, but also to report back up to your clients. And then as well, selfishly for us as an industry to be able to talk about what we're doing. But truly only, and I think this is important to communicate even to travel managers, right? What we'll be reporting is what is within a unit and what we can control, right? If we don't own the building, obviously we can't impact whether that building has solar panels. We can't change the HVAC of the building. But back to Carol's point, right? We can control what's inside of it. And we can also help to impact the decisions of the individual traveler. We may still not be able to decide for them, right? We're not going to shut their shower off at a certain amount of time for water, but we can recommend to them, right, that that's a sustainable measure that they could do. And we could report on that at the end in terms of energy consumed. So I think that that's just an important piece that we're hoping to be able to meet in this tool creation.
Thank you. Right. And another, obviously, sort of single point of contact, sort of a focus that we might want to bring to a future webinar. Megan, any other questions we can answer?
Nothing at this time, so we can go ahead and share some of the instructions that we have. But I mean, if anyone else still has any more questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat while we wrap things up, and we can always go back to that. So we're going to move forward here with some of our instructions for the different credits that you can receive.
Great. Thanks very much, Megan. Again, as Megan alluded at the very beginning of our webinar, we are fortunate to be able to offer continuing education credits from two major industry organizations. The first is Worldwide ERC, WERC. The seminar ID is right here on the screen, 27798. If you are looking to earn a continuing education credit either for your CRP or your GMS status, here's the sort of expectations for what you need to follow through to make that happen. You're welcome to take a screenshot, but you are going to be getting a complete set of this deck shortly. And so upon receipt of that, please just go ahead and follow through on these instructions, and you'll be able to earn that additional continuing education credit. And then also the Corporate Housing Providers Association has made a continuing education credit available to those who have already earned their Certified Corporate Housing Professional, CCHP status. So again, if you're in that category, feel free to follow these steps. Same argument applies there. You'll be getting a copy of this deck shortly so that you can follow these steps. And we're very grateful, obviously, both to CHPA as well as to Worldwide ERC for recognizing the educational value of these webinars and enabling folks to be able to get those continuing education credits. So thanks very much for that. Next steps, as we've indicated throughout this conversation, you will shortly be getting a copy of this deck as well as a survey. We, of course, very much appreciate your thoughts and feedback around the value of this content to you. Any suggestions for future webinars are welcome. We won't probably be doing any more in 2024, but the new year is upon us before we know it. So if you have any suggestions and ideas for what could help you in your sort of professional education, we're very happy to be a part of that. Excuse me. I'll be sending a copy of this, I think, within the next 24 hours. And then want to also advise you that there's a white paper coming out on some of these groups and what their expectations are, how business travel decisions get made. And we'll be publishing that next white paper by the 1st of October. And so with that, I cannot thank Carol, Stuart, and Nick enough for being part of this conversation. Very much look forward to getting the feedback from our audience. And thank you all so very much for joining us here today.